let's talk about macro weaving. In today's video, I'm going to tell you all about macro weaving, and I'm going to share 9 easy but essential macro weaving techniques that you need to know if you want to do, well, macro weaving. Before we dive in, please take a moment to make sure that you're subscribed. And I would be absolutely thrilled if you would hit the like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. I really appreciate it. Okay, so what is macro weaving anyway? Basically, it is a mashup of macrame and weaving. You make what I call a macrame skeleton, and then you leave spaces in the skeleton for weaving. So basically you do the macrame part first, and then you come in and you just get to add all kinds of fun stuff with weaving. So macro weaves can end up looking really like complicated and intimidating, but they're actually pretty easy to do for the most part. Now you can make anything complicated. Don't get me wrong, but with just a few knots and a few easy weaving techniques, you can make some really cool macro weaves. I recently released this video workshop for the Knots and Blooms Floral Macro Weave Workshop, and the whole thing was done with a combination of the techniques that we're going to be learning about in this video. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to check it out. It's a really fun workshop, and we make a beautiful floral macro weave, and I walk you through the whole process step by step. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the macrame side of it. Just like anything, you can get as complex as you want. You can do whatever macrame knots you want for your skeleton, but really you only need 2 or 3 knots to do a macro weave. And then if you want to add more and get more complicated on top of that, you know, go for it. The main 2 knots you're going to need to know are the Lark's head knot to attach your cords to your dowel, and the double half hitch knot. And then the other knot that I'm going to mention is the square knot, because it's handy to add a little bit of texture and, you know, fill in some spaces in your macro weave. But you could make a whole macro weave with just the Lark's head knot to attach your cords and double half hitch knots to make sections, and that would work too. If you don't know those knots, that's totally okay. I have you covered. Down in the description, you can sign up for my 5 basic macrame knots guide. It's free. All you have to do is sign up for my email list, and I will email it directly to you. And it's printable. It's a nice little guide. It has step-by-step photo tutorials and written instructions for 5 of the most important basic macrame knots. And if you want to go even one step further and learn a few more complicated knots, I have an ebook called 60 Macrame Knots and Knot Patterns, and you could use those for your macro weaves as well and get a little bit more complex. All right, so I'm going to make a little miniature macro weave here at my desk. I'm going to film it overhead so you can see the process, and it's just going to be a very tiny little example macro weave. All right, so here are my 10 cords. This is 5mm single strand cotton string, and I just made these 1 arm span long for this little demo. It's probably a little longer than I need, but that's okay. But I just have it taped here on my desk, and we're going to start. I've already attached my cords to the Lark's head knot, but I'll show you that just real quick. So all you do for a Lark's head knot is you take your cord, you fold it in half, you match the ends up, and then you fold it in half, you loop it over your dowel. And since I have this taped down, it's kind of tricky, but you just loop it over and bring your ends through the loop. All right, that's the Lark's head. Now what I'm going to do is a row of double half hitch knots going across, because it's just a common way to start off a macro weave. So I just have a piece of my cord that is, it just needs to be longer than the section that you're doing your double half hitch knots on. And just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to tape this down over here. But then we're just going to take the first cord, wrap it around, and tighten it up to there, and then do the same thing again. Bring it around and make sure everybody's where I want it. This first one's always a little tricky just because you're not anchored, but now you will be, and the rest will be easier. All right, so there's our first one, and I'm going to repeat. So I bring it around the filler cord, and then just wrap it around and bring it through. And I mean, I know if this is your first time doing this knot, this might not be, you might be confused. I have other tutorials that will really break down the double half hitch knot, and I will link those down below as well as that guide I told you about. It has a real good tutorial for this knot. So you just keep going, wrapping it around the filler cord and then wrapping it around again. And I'm just going to repeat that all the way across. There we go, we got our row double half hitch knots done. And now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do 3 rows of alternating square knots here. So to do a square knot, you just need 4 cords. I'm starting over here on the left. I'm gonna bring this left cord in front in an L shape in front of these 2 cords. Then this one goes in front of this one, behind the 2 filler cords, and then through this loop on the left. And then you just tighten it up, and you can leave as much space as you want. I kind of like to just put them up as close as I can because I have a hard time making the spacing even unless, you know, I use a guide or something. And then this right one, we're going to do the same thing but in reverse. We're going to have a reverse L shape going across the 2 center cords. Bring this left one in front of that, behind the center cords and through the loop on the right. And then you just tighten it up. And that's all there is to it. And then I'm going to repeat that across for each set of 4 cords. Okay, so there's my first row of square knots, and I'm going to now do an alternating row, which means that they're going to be in between each pair of knots, the next knot will. So you just are going to skip the first 2 cords, and then grab the next 4 that are in between these 2 knots, and tie another square knot, just like we did in the first row. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do that again for each one of these spots. All right, there's row 2, and see how it's offset from the first row. And then I'm going to go ahead and do one more row, the same as the first one that we did. All right, there we go. We got 3 rows of square knots, and you'll notice when you do square knots like this, like you have your double half hitch knots and then you do your square knots, it kind of cinches in. It just does that naturally. I really haven't found a good way to prevent that. Maybe spacing your knots out more or something would help, but it always does that to me. But one thing that you can do is another row of double half hitch knots, and it'll kind of bring it back out. So I usually like to do at least, I don't like to just end with a row of square knots. I like to do, even, you know, if you did a bunch of these, it would be the same for all of them. It would just kind of be cinched in, and then you could do another row of double half hitch knots underneath, and it kind of expands your cords back out. All right, so I'm going to hold this in place and wrap my cord around, get it in where I want it, and then do the other half. And get that first one to look halfway decent. There we go. And then we'll just continue on. But you get that first one done, it's easier. And it's easy to make a pretty straight row of double half hitch knots when you have a bunch of square knots above it to guide you. When you're just doing it with no other knots to tell you where the straight line is. It's a little trickier, which I'm going to be doing here in a minute, but we will get to that in just a second. All right, so you see that really kind of brings it back out and makes it not be so cinched in there in the middle. All right, so that is kind of that little demo for that part. Now I'm just gonna leave a decent piece of space here and do another row of double half hitch knots down below. So this one will be a little trickier to keep straight because I don't have my rows of knots at the top to kind of tell me where to go. So I'm just gonna have to eyeball it, which is always fun, but it's not too hard. I am gonna go like right about here. I think that's enough space to demonstrate all the techniques I want to demonstrate, and here we go. Alright, I think that's pretty straight. We're gonna go with it. And I'm gonna kind of scoot my knots in a little on the top, or the beginning and the end of the row, so it kind of matches more with that part. And that's just things to think about when you're doing this, is to try to keep things neat. If you're doing straight rows like this, you want to really try to make them the same, but you can also do really organic, you know, wavy shapes and stuff. You do not have to make everything all perfect and straight, but I just kind of am for this tutorial, but it is an option, you know, you can go either way. And another good thing about macroweaving is that it's okay if the cords in between your space aren't perfectly straight and everything, because we're going to be weaving in here and it's going to all get covered up, and you're not even going to see it. Now, if you were making, sometimes in macroweaves you'll have a space that strategically is open and left that way for the design, and in that case you'd want to get them more perfect, because then you're going to see them, and then, you know, you want it to look good. So but that's something to keep in mind. If you're weaving in it, I really don't worry about it too much, because you're not going to see it anyways. All right, now that we have done the macrame skeleton, it's time to do some weaving, and this is really fun. First, I want to talk about what I'm going to be using for the woven part. I have some chunkier macrame cords, same kind of cord, single strand cotton, but this is 9mm, so it is thicker, and I just like to add that in. It's fun. I also have some wool roving. I just have this one piece here that I have in my stash. This is just wool roving. This is a white piece, but you can split it just like this, and it'll split all the way down. And then you can, you know, use more than you think out of this piece. I'll probably split this one in half whenever I do, I'm gonna do the Soumak stitch with this, and that just gives you that beautiful puffy braided look on your weaves, and so we're going to do that. I also have some yarn I'm going to include. I have, these are just some wool roving yarns, and then I got some Wool Ease Thick and Quick from Lion Brand that I've just had in my stash for a long time. I'm going to throw some of that in there. All right, so now that we talked about all that, let's get down to the weaving techniques. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do in the weaving part of this is just some plain weave, which is also known as tabby weave. I am gonna use my Wool Ease Thick and Quick yarn for this part. You can do it with whatever you want. I'm gonna kind of eyeball how much I think it will take to do just a few rows. It doesn't really use up a lot of You know, it just pretty much uses the amount it takes to go back and forth. But all you're gonna do for this is just go over, under each cord. That's the most basic version of the plain weave or tabby weave. You could also do like over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, or you could do over 3, under 2, or whatever combination you want to do. It really doesn't matter, but you can get a different look based on the different, you know, amounts of cords that you go under. So I'm going under this one, over that one, under the next one, over, under, and you just keep going across. And then once you get all the way across, you can kind of pull it and get everything nice and straight, looking how you want it. All right, so I made it all the way across. I'm gonna hold this down and pull this through. And I'm gonna leave a little bit of extra over here on the side so I can tuck that in the back once I'm done. And you wanna just scoot down to the bottom. And that looks pretty good to me. Now we're gonna go back across, and we're gonna do it the opposite cord. So I'm gonna go around this last one, and then I'm gonna go over this one and under this one, over, under. So it's the opposite of the first row. And that will give you that woven look where it's kind of offset. So you don't want to pull too hard. That's the one thing you want to make sure is you don't pull, because it'll start cinching in on the side. So I just like to go around that and then kind of pull it to make sure there's no tightness there. And then I'm going over this one and under this one. All right, I made it all the way back across. So now I'm gonna hold this side and then pull it to kind of straighten everything out, but I don't want to pull this side in. And then we're gonna just scoot everybody down to the bottom. There we go. I like how that looks. And now I'm gonna go ahead and do another row. So again, I'm gonna start over here and I'm gonna go around this first cord. And again, make sure I don't pull too hard so it doesn't cinch in there. And then again, I'm gonna go over, under, all the way across. Okay, and then again, just gonna kind of hold this one so it doesn't get pulled in, and then just kind of straighten everybody out and push it down. Okay, I'm going to do one more row going across, and then I will show you the next technique. All right, so that is the plain weave section that I'm going to do here. The next thing I wanted to show you is how to make little tassels doing the ryan knot. Now the ryan knot, you're going to use it for a couple things. You can make tassels, or you can use it to make loops. And first I'm going to show you how to do the tassels, and then we'll do the loops next. So I'm just going to use some of this pink roving yarn. It does not matter what you use, and you can definitely use like macrame cord too. I've done, you do that too to make like tassels. This is pretty much how you make tassels in macrame, is with the ryan knot loop, or with the ryan knot tassel. So I'm just going to take a piece of cord, or a piece of yarn. I'm going to make my tassel pretty short. So I'm just going to go with this, and I'm going to cut a couple of them the same length, because let's just say I want to do like 3 pieces of yarn for my tassel. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that so they're all the same length. So there's my yarn I'm going to use for a tassel. And I guess, let's see, where do I want to put it? I think I'm going to put this one just right here in the middle, kind of. So for a raya tassel, you take all your pieces that you're going to make a tassel out of, and you kind of hold it like in front of the cords that you're going to make the tassel around. And then what you're going to do is take the left cords and you're going to bring them around and then through the center of these 2 cords, like that. And then you're going to take the right ones and you're going to go around the right cord, going around, and then you bring them through to the center like this. And then all you have to do is just kind of pull, and then you push this top part down, and you can just kind of pull each one to get it to look how you want. And there you go, you got a little tassel. And you can do that with any type of material. It looks really nice with macrame cord too. Then you can brush it out and you have a little brushed out tassel. And then you can cut it too. Like this is kind of long and it's totally covering this tabby weave part. So maybe I would want to trim it just a bit and then have like a really tiny little tassel. And isn't that cute? I have this little baby tassel here and it kind of still has this part showing. So I'm going to do a few more of these just across. There we go. We got 5 cute little baby tassels. Next, I wanted to show you how to do some, first I think what we're going to do, I was going to do it one way. After thinking about it for a second, I think what I'm going to do next is show you how to do the Soumak, because I'm going to do a section of Soumak here and then show you another technique above that. So for this, I'm going to be using some roving, and I'm going to divide mine into 2 strips because this is pretty thick for this tiny little wall hanging. And for this, there's, you know, again, just like the tabby, you can do a different version of it. You could do different amounts, you know, over certain amounts and under certain amounts of cords to get a different look, but I'm going to show you my basic, what I like to do. So I'm going to start by bringing this end and kind of just weaving it through to hide the end. I'm going to stick it here just so it's kind of out of the way. And then I'll be starting with this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over 4 cords and then come back around 2. And then go over 4, so it'll be these 4, and around 2, over 4, around 2. And I'm going to do it all the way across. So you just go 1, 2, 3, 4. And here's the 4th one. And then I'm going to go around these 2. So I just bring it like this. And you want to kind of keep it nice and puffy, not, you know, you don't want to pull too hard or anything. So keep a nice little puff like that. And then, so now I'm here, I'm going to go around 4 more and around 2. There we go. And then again, over 4, around 2. And just keep going all the way across like that. And I ran out of roving already on this side. I just happened to have exactly the right amount to go across. But you could keep going with the same cord or with the same piece of roving to continue. You would just wrap it around and then just start going the other direction. But since I ran out, I'm just going to kind of tuck that back here and start with a new piece. So here we go. And this time I'm going to go ahead and do the same. I'm going to tuck this end just kind of behind. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go back in the other direction, but we're going to make sure that we're offset on the cords we go around. Instead of doing exactly what we did going this way, we're going to kind of offset. And you don't have to. You can go around the same cords if you want, but I just like how it ends up looking that way. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to go, the first one, I'm going to go around, just instead of going over 4, I'm going to go over 3 and around 2. And that's just to get the offset started. So I'm going to go around these 2. And now I'm going to go ahead and start back with that over 4 around 2. And I'll show you how it ends up looking. And there we go. But you get this really pretty puffy braided look going with the roving, and I'm trying to just kind of make it so all these little tassels aren't totally hidden. But there you go, that's how you do that. And when you do the offset, it kind of makes it look more like a braid, because it's like, you know, a braid, it doesn't go, the pieces don't go perfectly connected, they're like offset. And that's how this ends up looking. I hope that makes sense. But you could go ahead and do it on the same cords and you just get more of an even look, so that works too. I just like it, the offset version. But that is the Soumak, and you can do this with any type of cord. You'll get obviously a much more subtle look if you use something like macrame cord or yarn, but with the roving, get that nice dramatic puffy thing going on, and it just looks really pretty, and you see that in a lot of weavings, and I really like it. Next up, I think I'm gonna do a couple rows of plain weave, just like 2, just to kind of tighten things up. That's a trick I learned from one of my favorite weaving YouTube channels is called Spruce and Linen, and she has excellent weaving tutorials. That's where I pretty much learned how to do all the weaving things that I know how to do. I watched a lot of her tutorials, so I highly recommend her channel if you want to learn more about the weaving side of things. I'm just going to do a quick 2 rows of plain weave with just a piece of the same macrame cord that I used for this, and then we'll move on to the next section. Okay, so I just did 2 little rows of plain weave here. Now that we did the Soumak, I now want to show you 2 types of loops. And this is one of my favorite techniques. I used this in my Knots and Blooms macrame workshop. I used it to make all kinds of really cute flowers, and they just turned out so pretty. So I'm just gonna, I have this roving yarn here. I'm gonna use this for this little demo. So first I'm gonna show you the Raya knot loops. So to start for this, I'm gonna tie my yarn onto this, this first string over here, just to hold it. There we go. And again, just like all the rest of these ends, that'll get tucked in later, so that's just gonna kind of hang out there for a minute. And I'm gonna scoot this down a little bit. So once you get that attached, the cool thing about this is you don't have to cut your yarn from your spool or from your skein or whatever. You can just keep it attached, and then you don't have to try to figure out how long to make your cord. But to start, so I'm holding my yarn here, and again, it's just like the tassels. We're gonna be going around 2 cords. We're gonna have our left side, we're just gonna wrap it around the left warp cord and bring a loop through like that. So you got this loop, and then you're gonna take this part and we're gonna go around the right warp cord, and we're gonna pull a loop, and we're gonna tighten it so that top part gets tightened up. But then we have these loops, and you just make them however long you want. You can do them, you know, different sizes, different lengths, whatever you want to do. But then you can shorten your loops if you need to by pulling this, and you just kind of pull them down, and then they're kind of in place, and it just locks it in pretty good. That's how it ends up though. You end up with 2 loops from doing Raya knot loops. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do the next 2. Then you just bring your cord around the left warp cord, bring a little loop through like that, and then go around the right one and bring a loop through like so. Pull them down, kind of just get them all snugged down there. And then if you want to shorten, you can. If you want to lengthen, you can just adjust and then push them down. And there you go. Got 2 more loops. And you can just keep going like that. So I'm going to go ahead and go across the row. There we go. So that is how you do the Raya knot loops. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn on this side, and then I'm going to tie it just kind of like do a double half hitch type situation to attach that to that cord, and then we'll just tuck that in the back when we're done. So that's our loops. You do want to make sure you tie the beginning and the end so they don't come undone later. And now I'm going to show you how to do some slip knot loops. And this is a little different than the Raya knot because it ends up giving you a single loop instead of a double, but it is just another way you can go. So again, we're going to start the same way as we started the Raya knot loops. We're going to tie our yarn onto the first cord. And again, we don't have to cut our yarn off of our spool or our skein or whatever you want to call it. You got your cord here. You're going to go around the whichever cord you're going to be making your loop around, and you pull it like this, and then you're going to bring this yarn and you're going to bring it through that loop you just made, and you're going to make another loop, and then you just kind of pull it to tighten it. You pull to the one side, you tighten it, and then you can make the loop smaller by pulling this, and there you go. You got one little loop. And now I'm going to do the same thing around to the next one. So again, I'm going to bring my yarn around like this, make that loop, then bring the yarn through that loop and pull to tighten, and then pull the the working yarn or cord to tighten it up and make it smaller. And then you get these little loops, and you can just continue across. And I'm just going to go ahead and go all the way across and then show you how to come back the other way. And you can make these loops as long or short as you want. I'm making them, not too long, but you can make them super long if you want. You can make them as long as you want. All right, I made it all the way across, and you see the loops look very similar once you really do a bunch of them. They're really similar to the Raya knot loops. It's just that you get one loop at a time instead of two loops at a time. So, it just depends on what you're doing and what your whole plan is. And the cool thing about this technique is you can go back the exact same way as you did. You don't have to switch sides, if that makes sense. I'll show you what I mean. I realized I forgot to show you how to go back to the left with the Raya knot loop, so we'll do that in a second. I'm going to do one more to show you how to do these going back. And I'm going to skip cords this time because you can also skip, but I'm going to go back now the other direction. So I'm going to do a loop here. So again, you just like you did before, you just go around the cord, and you don't have to switch directions or switch sides or anything like that. So I'm just going to go and do every couple of cords, and the cord here the yarn here that's going across will be hidden by my next row of loops that I'm going to do with the Raya loop. So you won't see that. You can always strategically hide anything where this yarn is going across there. The most important thing with this is that you tie it off when you begin and end, because if you pull, and I'm not going to demonstrate it, but if you pull this, it will just all come undone right now, so that's no fun. So I'm just going to go ahead and tie this to the last cord. I tied a knot around, or I tied a loop around like that, and there we go. And then you're good. Once you tie it off, they won't come off. They'll be good. So there we go. We got some more loops, some nice little fluffy loops there. And I love doing those because it really adds so much texture to your wall hanging. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit more Raya knot loops going back this way, just so I can show you the technique for that, because I kind of forgot. But it's the same, it's just going in the other direction. So again, I'm going to tie my cord right here on this warp string, and then we're going to do it just the same as we did before, but in the other direction. So I'm going to start on this side, bring it around this warp cord make a little loop, and then bring this side around this warp cord and make a little loop and pull them down. It's the same thing as just in reverse. So I'm going to start on this side, go down, bring my little loop out, go around this warp cord, and pull it down. I'm kind of sloping down to the left here, but that's all right. And I'm just going to cut my yarn and go ahead and tie it to this last cord. And there we go. Now we're good. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You get the idea. All right, for the next part, I want to show you how to tie knots and use that in your weaving. So I have just some 9mm cord here. And what I'm going to do, I have two different ways that I like to do this. So I'm going to start over here and just tie literally an overhand knot. So you just wrap it around and tie it. Bring the end through. And then you can just cut the ends and just have this little guy in your weaving somewhere and make the ends as long as you want. But see, there's just a little knot. And then if you include that like in with other stuff and you have just these little knots stuck in, kind of adds some nice texture. And you can just like stick another guy over here. There we go, another little random knot. And maybe I'll stick one over here. And this can look really, really dramatic when you use like really thick cord. I've seen where people use like super duper thick cord, like maybe 25mm cord, and then you do these big knots and it just makes this really pretty effect in your woven parts of your projects. So okay, that's just a basic overhand knot you can just include in there in random places. And I wanted to show you my other thing I like to do is I have another piece of 9mm cord. This is the same cord, but I've just gone through and I've tied overhand knots in the cord, just spaced out with a few inches in between. And then you can take this and just weave it into your weaving. I could just start weaving. I could bring this through and do like over, under. Then you just kind of do your over under weave and then just place the knots where you want them. I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up and show you because it's going to kind of take a minute. But you just do the plain weave and then kind of stick the knots where you want them. So this has gotten a little crazy looking, but you can see that you really add a lot of texture with this overhand knot technique. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple rows of plain weave here just to kind of get things back in order. All right, there we go. I got a couple more rows of plain weave in there, and I also went in and added a couple more plain overhand knots by themselves to kind of change up this section a little bit. I just like how that looks. And you see how nicely the plain weave will like reorganize things. Like it was getting real crazy, And that plain weave just kind of like, okay, it's okay. This part's gonna stick out further, that's just how it is because of the extra stuff you got. But then if you do a little plain weave on the top and the bottom, it kind of organizes at least parts of it. And now real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and flip this over and weave in the ends a little bit just so you're gonna see what it looks like a little bit more finished. So let's flip it over and see how we fared. And everything got kind of smushed. We just got to fluff them back up. But that is how it will look once you weave your ends in, and it really makes a world of difference. So okay, let's go over the techniques we learned. We did the plain weave or the tabby weave. We did the Ryan knot tassels. They're down here. They're just kind of hidden by our next thing we learned, which was the Soumak weave. Then we learned Ryan knot loops and slip knot loops and more Ryan knot loops and knotting, and then a little bit more plain weave. So there we go. With these techniques, you can really make just about any macro weave you want. You can of course add in more techniques. There's other weaving techniques you can learn. There's all kinds of other stuff you can do, but this is a really good base to start with. In my workshop, I showed how to make flowers with this technique, but with roving, and it's really, really pretty, and it's very dramatic and cool. So definitely check that workshop out if you're interested in learning more about macro weaving. I'll link to it down below. All right, so we finished our little mini macro weave. Now, of course, there's more to finish. You can always cut your fringe nice and neat and everything like that, but I'm just gonna leave it here. You get the idea with that. You would just cut your fringe how long you want it. I honestly think this guy turned out kind of cute. I wasn't really expecting it to be cute because I was just going to test out some techniques, but I kind of like it. I might hang it up on my wall. I wanted to give another quick shout out. I already did earlier in the video, but I wanted to mention it again. My favorite channel for weaving tutorials is called Spruce and Linen. Janelle over at that channel, she does amazing tutorials for weaving. So if you want to really like go further with the weaving side of this, you should definitely check her channel out and see what she has. So she has some really cool tutorials, and that's where I learned how to do all my weaving stuff, was from watching her tutorials. So I definitely recommend her channel, Spruce and Linen. I'll put a link down in the description to that channel as well. All right, so that is the 9 techniques you need to know for macro weaving between the macrame knots and the weaving techniques. You should now be ready to dive into your first macro weave if you want to. Be sure to check out my macro weave workshop down in the description, and I have more macro weave workshops in the works. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thanks for watching.